thank you for joining today's NeedyMeds special topic webinar, Becoming an Empowered Patient, presented by Mended Hearts. My name is Carla. I am the Director of Education and Partnerships at NeedyMeds. And before we get started, I'd like to go over a few tips so you can make the most out of today's presentation. If you have questions, you can type them in to your questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel at any time. Just know we will reserve answering questions until the end. If we don't have the time to answer your question, we will follow up with you personally via email. But of course, we will also provide the contact information for both NeedyMeds and Mended Hearts. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing on the NeedyMeds YouTube channel. And you can find both PowerPoint slide decks that accompany today's presentation in the handout section, again, of that GoToWebinar control panel. So with that, let's get started with what is NeedyMeds. For those of you not yet familiar with us, NeedyMeds is a national nonprofit founded just over 2 decades ago by a retired family physician, Dr. Rich Sagal, and Rich is still our president. On your screen is all of our fancy wording about our mission statement, a statement about how we achieve our mission, and our vision statement. But simply put, NeedyMeds connects people to programs that will help them afford their healthcare expenses. And we do that free and anonymously through our website, needymeds.org, and our helpline, 1-800-503-6897. Here's a screenshot of our website, and I like to put that up because really our website is the face of our organization, and it also gives me a chance to point out a few things. If you are looking for programs to save on your medications or other healthcare expenses, you will find that under the Patient Savings tab. And to see what other webinars are scheduled, to order print materials, to sign up to receive our newsletter, check out the Advocates tab. Also, I mentioned in the beginning that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the NeedyMeds YouTube channel, and you can find a link to that here on the top right of our homepage with the rest of the social media icons. It's the third one from the left. So as I mentioned, a big part of the NeedyMeds mission is educating people, and we define that in 2 ways. One, by educating people about NeedyMeds and the resources we have to offer, and 2, by making them aware of other organizations and resources that will prove useful in their healthcare journey. And that is why we are so pleased to have Andrea Bear, the Executive Director of Mended Hearts and Mended Little Hearts, here with us today to share her expertise. So first, let me tell you a little bit about Mended Hearts. Mended Hearts is a national and community-based nonprofit that has been offering the gift of hope to heart disease patients, their families, and caregivers. Their mission is to inspire hope and improve the quality of life for heart patients and their families through peer-to-peer support. Yet today's webinar is going to touch on a subject that is important to everyone, not only heart patients, which is how to become an empowered patient. Andrea is going to explain how advocating for yourself and being an active part of your own healthcare team can improve your health. So now that I told you just a little bit about Mended Hearts, let me tell you a little bit about our guest panelist, Andrea, who is going to walk us through this important topic. Andrea has a Master of Science in Nonprofit Management and Leadership, is a board-certified patient advocate, and, as I mentioned, is the Executive Director of Mended Hearts. Andrea has been deeply involved in advocacy efforts and working to ensure that the patient voice is at the table. Andrea resides in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and with her husband and 4 children, but she's here with us now. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic and the screen to Andrea, and hopefully we'll do that seamlessly. And as we're doing that, I want to remind anybody that as Andrea is giving you the presentation, you can feel free to type in any questions you may have into that questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel. And although you can do that at any point throughout the presentation, remember again that we will reserve answering those questions until the end. So with that, I know Andrea just grabbed the screen, so I'll go ahead and hand the mic over to her as well. Thanks, everybody, and enjoy today's presentation.
Thank you so much, Carla, and thank you all for being here with us today. I'm very excited to give you guys some information on how to become an empowered patient. I first wanted to just go over a couple of things about Mended Hearts. I know Carla had given you some information about our mission. I did want to let you know that we've been supporting patients since 1951, and we have over 280 chapters across the country serving over 300 hospitals. We're in 44 states, and we have members in all 50 states. So a little bit about me, because the first question I'm always asked is what makes you an expert? So I always like to share a little bit of my story, because I think that helps to put everything a little bit more into perspective. So in 2009, my son was born with a congenital heart defect and Down syndrome. He had open heart surgery at 11 weeks, but he's also had 6 surgeries and multiple hospital stays in his short life. And what I found was that navigating his healthcare was daunting and scary. And finding online resources was just a pitfall of despair. And I had never made healthcare decisions in my life. And so it was really a foreign concept to me when he was born. And so I really felt alone. And even when I was surrounded with family and friends, I felt that nobody understood me. And I'm sure that there were a lot of other people out there who felt the same way when they receive a diagnosis. You feel very confused and overwhelmed because you're really kind of at the mercy of doctors. You might feel out of place in medical conversations, and you kind of feel like you have to have that blind trust because doctors know best, right? That's what we were taught when we were growing up. And so you always feel like you might be challenging the doctor and you may not want to challenge them. So you just take what they say and you move on. That's a very paternalistic way of medicine. And I think that the ball is really shifting now. And so we want to make sure that patients are ready for these conversations that they'll be having. This is a great quote by Oprah Winfrey that says, "You get in life what you have the courage to ask for." And I think this really goes well with our healthcare conversation, because you need to talk to your doctor and have the courage to be open and honest with them during your healthcare conversations. So let's look at empowerment. And what is empowerment? There is a definite responsibility and ownership of what's happening. You need to understand the why so that you can apply guidelines. You also need to make sure that you're weighing the impact of decision makers on all stakeholders. So it would be yourself, your family, the healthcare team, the hospitals, everybody who is involved needs to have a say. And it's really about making more trade-offs and not less. But finally, empowerment is an earned privilege, not a given right. You have to make sure that you're taking that as a definite responsibility. So we can all be patients, but we must learn how to become empowered patients. Empowered patients become 100% partners in their healthcare decisions with their doctors. They're better educated and you make better healthcare decisions. So we always like to say, make sure you're becoming a CEO of your own healthcare. So a few steps along the way to make sure that you're getting the best out of becoming an empowered patient. Step number 1 is to educate yourself. And the most important thing is, do you truly understand? And research shows that you need to hear a message 7 times before completely retaining that information. And during your initial diagnosis, you may be in emotional crisis, and therefore you can't retain that information, and it's a lot harder to do so under emotional distress. And adding to that is the medical language can be really difficult to understand. So sometimes you need to ask for clarification, ask for a simpler explanation, or ask your doctor to use different language so that you understand. And like I said, 7 times is how many times that you really need to hear the information before you can retain it completely. So you want to keep asking questions. Do you understand the diagnosis? What does this diagnosis mean for you? What are the short-term and long-term prognoses of the disease or of the diagnosis? And lifelong care versus short-term treatment. Is this a lifelong need, or is this something that's just short-term and you're going to recover 100% from it? Those are questions you need to make sure that you're understanding about the diagnosis. Make sure that you're a part of the team. You can't be empowered unless you know what you're up against. And so make sure that you're asking the doctor to explain and explain again if you don't understand the first time. Ask the nurses to explain. Sometimes peer supporters can help you understand a little bit better than the doctors, but don't assume that or just take the diagnosis and assume that you understand, because you may find later that you have more questions. So you want to ask questions about your options. Are there different therapies and treatments that you can consider? And don't always just assume that the first and only option they give you is the best. So do your research. Are you in the right place? Are you weighing all your options? Can you go somewhere else? That's an insurance question typically. Make sure that you're looking at all of the angles and being able to understand what you're up against and what your options are. And then you want to voice your opinions. This is one of my favorite cartoons because the man says, I hate cats, I want a dog scan. So sometimes you can't always get what you want, but you really do need to voice your opinion and know that your story matters and your voice matters. And if you're uncomfortable with something, speak up and ask for a solution. Make sure that you're always kind and considerate with your requests, because giving respect to the medical team really goes a long way. Remember, you're a part of a team, and so we want to talk to each other in respectful and responsible manners. But if you're afraid, say so. Tell them you're afraid, and this is really bothering you if you're uncomfortable. Now, if you have to have a surgery, well, not everybody does, but here are some questions that you should consider asking the hospital and your healthcare team prior to a surgery. Questions like, how often have you performed this procedure? What is your survival rate? Notice that those are for the actual surgeon themselves. What is the average recovery time at this hospital? What complications are likely to occur? How does the healthcare team work together? And how do you handle patients with this condition? The healthcare team as a team is really vital. A lot of surgeons will tell you that they do the surgery, but then they turn that care over to those ICU and PICU nurses and doctors, and they trust that that team is going to continue to take good care of you. So make sure you understand how they work together. What's the mortality rate at this hospital? Now note that mortality rate may not be a good indicator because some hospitals take high-risk patients, and then therefore they have higher mortality rates because they're willing to do a surgery on somebody who is very high risk. And so you can understand that mortality rate may not be a great picture of what's happening in the hospital, and so you may need to get a clearer explanation. And then what resources are available to me at this hospital? Consider things about social services, social supports for maybe your caregiver or a family member, parking, all of those things that may seem incidental can really add up and make a huge difference in the way your hospital stay is. And then you have to be very honest with yourself and be honest with your physician about what will work for you. So you have to ask yourself questions like, will I be able to afford this treatment? Will I be able to obtain the medication or the therapy that's prescribed? What lifestyle changes will I need to make? And do I have other options? Because let's be honest, if you can't afford the medication that the doctor is prescribing you and you don't tell the doctor that, you're just not going to get the prescription filled and it's not going to better you. So you need to make sure that if you can't afford it, then you need to be honest with the doctor and say, is there anything that is less expensive because I can't afford this treatment? And then you can look at options. Maybe the doctor has resources for you, like NeedyMeds or other pharmaceutical companies do some financial assistance. But you need to make sure that you have an open and honest conversation with the doctor. Lifestyle changes. Sometimes lifestyle changes are really hard. And you need to make sure that you're honest with yourself about being able to do this, because you don't want to set yourself up for failure, and you need to know if there are other options that you can have. So on online research is it's a really bitter pill because it's great in a lot of ways. We have so much research and so much information on our fingertips every single minute of every single day, but there are so many there is so much bad information, so many bad websites that you can get to, and they're not reputable. So you need to proceed with caution. I always let everybody know to only go to reputable sites. Don't Wikipedia anything. You want to make sure that you're looking at the Centers for Disease Control, the NIH. If it's a heart thing, it's the American Heart Association or Mended Hearts, the American Diabetes Association, the American Cancer Society, people who have a very proven track record in the field that have good and factual information out there. Be careful when comparing stories from other individuals. When my son was born, one of the big things that I would run across would be blogs, and people would blog about their children. And it was hard to not compare, but you would find a lot of false information and a lot of information that was not clearly understandable. And so you want to be careful on doing that. Be careful comparing hospitals or doctors based on the word of others. Some doctors, some people love their doctor and they think he's the greatest person in the world. While I bet you can find, just as many people who have had bad experiences. So just because one person does or does not like a hospital or a doctor is not something that you can base as a truth. And you need to research to prepare questions, not as facts. So research and ask questions to your doctor. When I went to my very first checkup with my son, he was a week old, and we went to see the cardiologist, and I had a slew of questions to ask him, and he said, I see you've been Googling, which was true. I was Googling. But the good thing was that I asked the doctor about what I had Googled to find out if it was true and to find out if that was an option for us. And you can connect with disease-specific organizations for more information, because we really, like Mended Hearts, can drill down into the heart disease realm, and we have a lot of really great content out there, as does all of the other disease-specific organizations that you'll be able to run across. And so once you've gathered all of your information, you've done all of your research, and you've talked to your doctor, and now you can start doing some shared decision making. And this shared decision making requires the dialogue between the provider and the patient to reach an agreed course of treatment. And it can only happen if you're educated and understand what decisions you're making, if you have all of your information about all of your options, and you've been given time to digest and think about your decision. That's a big one. Don't make the decision unless it's an emergency situation and nobody has time. That's different. But if it's something that you can think about for a little while, think about it and then revisit it and come back. Maybe it's a couple hours, maybe it's the next day, maybe it's the next visit, but don't make a rash decision without being able to truly think about it. You want to make sure that your family and you are on the same page and that you're confident in your decision. And then you talk to your clinician. So I love this graphic because it shows truly how the healthcare industry has become kind of a full circle of patient-centered care. We used to be that all very paternalistic. The doctor or the clinician would give you information, make recommendations, and as the patient, you would say, okay. Well, then we kind of grew into an informed medical decision making where the doctor would give you a little more information and they would let you know what they thought you should do, and you would say, okay. But I think now we've come to a nice point in healthcare where shared decision making is really important. And doctors are starting to take notice and talk to their patients a lot more. And that is a complete circle. It's information and recommendations from the clinician to the patient. The patient shares their values and their preferences, maybe information that they've gathered, and then they make recommendations. And it goes back and forth and around until we come to an agreement and a decision on that's best for the patient and the clinician. So know your rights. There are some things here that you know that you have a right to. This is across all boards of medicine and healthcare. There may be more in specific areas, but these are really important. You have the right to be treated like a part of the team. You have a right to ask questions and get answers. You have the right to a second opinion or a third or a fourth, how many ever opinions you feel that you need. That is your right. You have the right to suggest alternatives. You have the right to feel confident in your team. You have the right to change your mind. And you have the right to appeal decisions if you don't agree. Now, your appeal decisions, that can be in a variety of different ways, depending upon if it's a hospital or a doctor's office. But just know that you do have the right to appeal if you don't agree with the information that you're being given. Like to take a moment and talk about why caregivers are so important. Your caregiver should, if you don't mind, have your caregiver attend your doctor's appointments with you, because when you have two people in the room, you can get sometimes better information because you're both listening. Some people hear some things that other people don't. So make sure that you have a supportive caregiver if you have somebody in your life who is willing. Have them attend the meetings with you and include them in conversations. Make sure that they feel empowered to ask questions about your care. And, sometimes the caregiver's insight is completely different from the patient. And so it's really vital to include them. And then you want to make sure that you're taking responsibility. So once a decision is made, you need to own that decision that you made with your team. Make sure that you are confident in your decision. Realize that you can change your mind if it's not working for you, but you need to then communicate that with your healthcare team. And every step of the way, voice your concerns if you have any. Also know that you're not alone. Connecting with others can help you navigate your journey. You can share your fears and struggles. You can get support for lifestyle changes, get emotional support, and educational opportunities. So these are things that Mended Hearts provides for heart patients. And I know for a fact that there are multiple organizations out there across all kinds of disease states that can do the same thing for you. And so you need to know you're not alone and find that peer support. It's invaluable. And that really kind of wraps up my informational part of the slides. I have my information here, and I will turn it back over to Carla, and then I think we can just do some question and answers.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Andrea. And it's such a pleasure for you to share your expertise with the NeedyMeds audience, because as I said, although Mended Hearts is dedicated to heart patients, today's topic is applicable to everyone, not only for them personally, but for their family, loved ones, even patients and clients. I think it's applicable straight across the board. So I want to thank you for that. And it gives the audience really, I think, a taste of the Mended Hearts style, which is not only are they current, accurate, and up to date with the information they have, but they're very approachable and they speak to you in a language that I think we can all understand. So, as Andrea said, we are certainly going to take time to get to questions. And as those are coming in, a quick reminder that you can type them into that question section of your GoToWebinar control panel. And I do see some coming in, which is great. And I want to take a moment to point out a few things about NeedyMeds in the meantime. One is we do certainly hope that you rely on NeedyMeds as a source of support. What you're looking at on your screen now are our most popular healthcare cost savings programs, and you can learn more about those and check them out by again clicking on that patient savings tab on the navigation bar on our homepage. In addition to connecting you to healthcare savings, we also want to be a go-to place to educate yourself. Andrea specifically talked about a few things that I think NeedyMeds has resources that can really complement it. First of all, Andrea touched upon being cautious about turning to online information. In the beginning, I mentioned that today's webinar is being recorded and will be converted into a video to be posted to our YouTube channel. And again, you can find a link to that on the top right of our homepage. It's the third icon from the left with the rest of the social media icons. We put all of our videos, presentations, and webinars there. So that's a great source of education. Now, if you check out that YouTube channel, I specifically want to point you to a webinar we did. We did it in 2017. We repeated it again in 2018, but the information is still current. And it's a webinar dedicated to health websites, which to trust and why. So again, if you go to that YouTube channel, you can type in to the search bar, health websites, which to trust and why. I think it's worth checking out. The other resource that I'd like to point out is on the left side of our homepage, you'll see a box for something called Health Storylines. Health Storylines is a free self-care app that helps you to manage and take control of your health. And it can act as a medication reminder, a vitals tracker, and it can also act as a journal and a symptom tracker. And it connects with other activity trackers such as Fitbit. I'm pointing this out because oftentimes when we go to the doctor, although we want to provide a clear picture of what has been going on in our life, it's tough to be detailed about that. This app will help you to do it. So check out again the the NeedyMeds Health Storylines app, and you can find a link to that in the box on the left side of our homepage. I also hope you visit that Advocates tab, and that's a great way to stay up to date by signing up to our newsletter, ordering print materials, and checking out other upcoming webinars. What you're looking at now are the webinars we have scheduled through the end of the month, and you can also read more about these webinars and sign up for them on the bottom right hand of our homepage on the calendar of events. So I do hope you find all of those resources helpful and a complement to what Andrea has been focused on today. So with that, as promised, I wanted to leave up the contact information. Feel free to reach out to Mended Hearts or NeedyMeds directly. And with that, Andrea, let's get to some of those questions coming in. Here's a great one, which is, in addition to health storylines that I mentioned that can act as a medication reminder, do you know about any other suggestions for me to remember to take my medications? It's a great question.
Great question. And, you know, a lot of times we have this question from people, and I just recently did a poll with some of our members on what are your best tips for remembering your medication. And the information was is far diverse, from just taking a pillbox and sorting it into your pillbox for a week. And then every morning you can check and make sure you did your pillbox, keeping your pillbox beside your bed or in the bathroom, wherever you are, first thing in the morning and first thing at night, or if you have to have them at meals, keep them in the kitchen. That, of course, only works if you don't have small children at home. But I thought it was a very good idea because sometimes I'll be standing there like, did I take my medicine this morning? Because I can't remember if I did or not. That's a great way to remember. But there are a lot of great apps now that you can put on your phone with reminders to taking medications if you're more into the technology. So I think that connecting with somebody else and to another organization's website and kind of sharing information as a discussion, like what's worked for you, you may find something that will help you that's a little out of the box.
Very helpful. And thanks to our audience member for asking that question because it's certainly one we can all, many of us, myself included, can use tips on. Another question coming in, also important. How do I find people in my area to get support from?
So that's great. Mended Hearts, like I said, is across the country and 280 different areas. You can go to our website at mendedhearts.org and click on connect, and it will say find a local chapter, and you can put in your zip code and it will give you the closest chapter of in your location. But you can also reach us online through our mendedhearts.org website. You can connect to our discussion boards and talk to people online. You can give us a call at 1-888-HEART-99, or you can email us at info@mendedhearts.org. All of those ways we can connect you with people in your area.
So important. And I'll also take a moment to point out, and I keep having the opportunity to plug the NeedyMeds YouTube channel, but we're very proud of our relationship with Mended Hearts. And we keep bugging Andrea to come back and do more presentations, not only because of the resources that Mended Hearts has, but also the topics they touch upon are applicable to everybody and not only heart patients. And within the last couple of years, Andrea actually did a wonderful webinar for the NeedyMeds audience called Connected for Success, How Your Social Network Can Help Improve Your Health. So if you'd like to watch that video, and I encourage you to do so because it really, just like today's presentation, it's relatively short, very concise, and really drives home important points. Go ahead and, again, visit that NeedyMeds YouTube channel, and in the search bar, just type in Connected for Success, and it'll bring up that less than half-hour presentation. I promise it'll be worth your time. So let's get to another question coming in from our audience, which is, I'm a caregiver, and my husband is telling the doctor that he feels great, but I know he's really depressed. How can I help if my husband isn't telling the doctor the truth? That's a really important question and something a lot of us deal with.
It is actually, and as a caregiver, it can be very stressful and overwhelming to have to feel like you don't want to be like a police to your husband, but you also want to make sure that you're getting your husband the best care. The first and most important step would be to talk to your husband. Ask him if you can share with the doctor some of your concerns the next time you go. You want to make sure that you're keeping that autonomy with the husband, having his right to being able to be the patient. But you also want to make sure that the doctor is aware that there are other issues that may be happening. You never want to go behind your husband's back. You want to make sure that he's aware and informed of all of the decisions and information that you're sharing. But I think it's very important to, as a caregiver, to be able to relay that information to the doctors.
So important. Thanks for that question, Andrea. Thanks for taking, really stressing that in this situation, speaking with the husband about conveying it to the doctor is so important. I remember going with my dad to appointments, and I really thought the information I was sharing was so crucial to his well-being, but it did the same thing. It contradicted what he was saying. It gave a different picture, and it really didn't go over well with my dad. So I really think it's important, just from a practical point of view, to keep that trust with the person that you're helping. And another question that came in, which we're probably going to wrap up today's presentation with this question. But again, if you did ask a question that we didn't get the chance to answer, we'll follow up with you via email, or you can reach out to NeedyMeds or Mended Hearts. So here's the question coming in, and I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit. But the question from the audience is, do you really feel that the culture is truly changing so that doctors today are willing to discuss rather than dictate a patient's care? This individual is sharing that in certain areas of the country or with certain doctors, they may still not seem as willing to be part of the team and rather would prefer to be viewed sort of as a god. So how would you go about, first of all, do you think that the culture is really changing, and how would you go about dealing with a healthcare provider that doesn't seem willing to get on board as part of a team?
So that's a great question, and something that we actually talk about a lot in the healthcare industry. I do think that the culture is changing. I think it's changing slower than the patient would like. But we also have to remember that doctors, for the longest time, were perceived as being the end all be all, because, I actually just had a conversation with my mother a year ago, because she said, well, they're the doctor and they're the ones who went to school, so I'm just going to listen to them, which is great. And I think it's important, but I also think it's important for you as a patient to understand and be comfortable with the physician. So there are areas in the country, I'm sure, that are a little bit more behind. There are probably doctors who are not as tuned into the patient-centered care. And so my suggestion is always that if you are not comfortable and feel confident in your healthcare team, find a team that you're confident and feel connected to. There is nothing wrong with looking for another doctor. There's nothing wrong with trying to find a doctor who is willing to listen. And it may not just be the doctor themselves. Sometimes there are physician assistants or nurse practitioners, the nursing parts of the doctor's office. Those are all people who can give you lots of information and answer questions that maybe the doctor doesn't have a lot of time for. Um, Doctors are always really in a hurry. So when I go to a doctor's office, I make sure that I have my questions in advance. That helps me understand what I'm thinking about, and making sure that I ask the questions without dragging out the conversation for too long. And I think that doctors who get that from their patient, they're more apt to sit and have that conversation with you.
So helpful, Andrea. Thank you for another thorough answer, and thanks to our audience members for not only taking time out of their day to join us, but participating as well. And I really am not planning this, but I promise the last question really did lead into me plugging the NeedyMeds YouTube channel again, because in fact, just a couple of weeks ago, we had a special topic webinar called Tips for Making the Most Out of Your Doctor's Appointment. And I think it speaks to the what we were just addressing now with that recent question from our audience member. So please, again, do check out those videos on the NeedyMeds YouTube channel. And as I mentioned, we do usually keep the question segment of our webinars brief. So if you asked a question and we didn't answer it, we'll get back to you, or you can reach out to NeedyMeds or Mended Hearts sooner. We do hope you stay in touch by following us on social media, registering for other upcoming webinars, of course, subscribing to our YouTube channel, and be sure to check out needymeds.org regularly, as we are always updating not only the content, but the cost savings programs that are available. With that, I want to thank everybody for their time, and thank again Andrea for taking time out of her busy schedule to share her expertise with the NeedyMeds users and friends. Have a wonderful rest of the day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.